dears, and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Pamela and I put out beauty related videos like once or twice a week. So today's video is going to be a little update on my eyeshadow palette collection, and I've actually got a giant stack that you can't see that starts right about here. Goes all the way down to the table. And wow, has my eyeshadow palette collection grown in the last like year and a half. I actually rewatched my very first eyeshadow palette collection, and it was very small then, and now it's like, oh, it's pretty big now. Pretty big. I don't know if I should be ashamed or if I should be underwhelmed or overwhelmed. I don't really know how I should feel about it, but there is a decent amount of eyeshadow right in front of me. That's just how palettes are though, right? Like we get them, we play with them, we have fun, and then we just want the next best thing. I don't know. Eyeshadow is my favorite thing ever, so that's why I like so much of it. And I love every single one of you so much. Oh, if you could only see that I'm actually hugging my little stash here. Maybe you'll see that in the thumbnail or something. I don't know. We'll figure something out. But I don't have any more babbling to do, so let's just get right into this. Yes. Okay, so the first stack I want to talk about here are the drugstore ones. I do have one other one in a different pile. I'm calling that my one-stop shop pile or whatever, but I do want to talk about my drugstores one first, and the first two that I want to talk to you guys about are the Wet n Wild Comfort Zone palettes. I have the original, and then I do have the revamped one. My original did fall apart as far as the packaging, and so I ended up just depotting it and putting it into one of these little Z palettes. I absolutely love this palette still. And then here is the new revamped one. I love the matte shades in here so much. I'm so glad that they have a bomb formula for the mattes, because if it would have been bad like mattes with these beautiful shimmering shades, like this palette would have just been like not very good in my opinion, and it would have just been something that I didn't gravitate towards. But so I'm definitely glad that they ended up repackaging this and adding those transition shades. But again, next up we've got the e.l.f. Mad for Matte 2 palette. Sorry if my light is blinding you. Just want to show you guys the colors in its truest like form or whatever. But anyway, this palette to me is probably the best palette that e.l.f. has come up with so far. I love all of the matte shades in this palette. They're definitely beautiful, creamy, pigmented in my opinion. I love that you can create both neutral, warm, and even some cool tone looks using this palette. And I'm gonna swatch this purple one for you because this purple is really pretty. And then let's swatch this really pretty coral shade too. These are pretty good in my opinion, considering that it is a $10 palette. As you can see, the pigmentation is there. It's very soft, but it's nonetheless a very buildable formula, which I prefer building up my colors, especially when they're bright colors like this versus having full-on pigmentation. But that's just a preference. Next up are the Emily Noel palettes. I have the Needs, which has completely fallen apart on me, but that's because I really like it. And I love this palette. I love almost everything. I'll be honest, there are a couple of things in here that I don't like anymore. I don't like this highlight because it is a little bit too light for my skin tone. I also don't really care for this pink just because I don't like pink eyeshadow, but that's my own personal preference. Everything else is fair game, and as you can see, I really like the translucent setting powder. Love this palette. Once I hit pan on a few other shades, I am going to repurchase it just because mine has, you know, fallen apart on me. And I, like I said, really enjoy this palette. And then next up is the Emily Noel, the Wants palette. I'm not a big fan of giant palettes like this, but the color scheme and the person behind it, obviously I love Emily Noel, were the reason why I bought it. I love that you have these beautiful romantic shades. You've got purples in here. You've got a really nice like neutral gold. There's some greens. There's just about everything that you need to create a beautiful look. Again, it's one of those palettes that comes with a really nice cream bone color as well as a black. Gotta love that in my palettes, and I'm never disappointed when I have that. This next set of palettes is what I call my one-stop shop. I guess I could have put that one Emily Noel palette in this, but I didn't feel like it. But I've got this one here. This is something that I have created with my own single eyeshadows. I call it my Coastal Scents palette, but this is something that I love because obviously I've picked all the shades in here. I love that I've got pops of color on the top. I've got my neutrals here. I've talked about this palette multiple times. There is more than just Coastal Scents in here, but a majority is Coastal Scents. Again, I love it because I made it myself, but I wanted to include this because I love my palette, and if you're curious about this, I've got videos on it, so I will link them down below. Next up is this Profusion Eye and Cheek palette. I love this palette. This is a little bit more recent in my collection. These shades definitely surprised me. I did not think that they were gonna be this pigmented or this pretty when I first opened it up. I thought they were gonna be a little bit on the cheap side, I'm not gonna lie, but you know what? Don't knock it till you try it, right? The shimmer shades are so buttery, and you know, the mattes do have quite a bit of kick up, but nonetheless, they are super duper pigmented. I'll swatch that first shade here, and oh my gosh, is that not beautiful? And then look at how rich that brown is. Like, they're really good, really pigmented. Again, totally surprised me. I did not see that coming with this palette. It has a very strange nostalgic smell that I can smell right now, I'm not gonna lie, but it's still a really good palette. And even for bulky packaging, like, I still think this is pretty good. Jaclyn Hill palette, this is something that I'm sure everybody and their mother has seen. It is definitely a very beautiful palette. Lots of warm tones if you're into warm tones. Even though I do think that you can curate some cool tone looks out of this palette, because there are some shades in here that go a little bit more on the cool tone side in my opinion. This is one of those that I believe the only thing that's missing in here is a really nice cream bone color, like a matte bone color. Other than that, it would be the most perfect warm tone lovers palette. And every time I use this palette, I'm always pleasantly surprised as to how beautiful everything is in here. Every time I use it, I am always pleasantly surprised. So I love this palette. Like I said, the only thing that I think is missing is a really nice matte cream colored, but other than that, I love it. Moving on to some of my higher end palettes. I only have one from Tarte, and Tarte doesn't really put out too many things that I gravitate towards, but I love this palette. Sorry if I'm blinding you. This packaging is extra, like extra. But I love this palette. It's definitely simplicity at its finest. You have a cool tone like top row, you have a more neutral like row, and then you have one that's a little bit more on the pinky, romantic, warm tone, kind of on the warm tone side. I used to love using this palette for an everyday basis. I have a couple of dips in some of these. Maybe I'll try and pan this year, stick it on my vanity just so I can get some use out of it. The shimmering shades in here are absolutely stunning. Like, these shimmering shades like really are beautiful. They're not glittery and chunky, they are just metallic and blinding, as you could see. But I love this palette. I don't get too much use out of it anymore, but it's still a really good palette in my opinion. I have two palettes from Too Faced that I want to talk about next. One is the Peanut Butter and Jelly palette. I really loved this when I first got it. The color scheme is great for everyday use with, like I said, a couple of pops of color in my opinion. This palette was basically what made me realize that I love 9-pan eyeshadow palettes, because they're compact, they're just straight to the point. You have a very cohesive color scheme in most of these. They're never like all over the place or randomly selected. I feel like everything just goes so well with each other, and I love that. So I'm always gravitating towards smaller like 9-pan palettes because of this. Like, this is basically what sparked my love for 9-pan eyeshadow palettes. And then the other Too Faced one I have got is the infamous chocolate bar palette, and I've said this hundreds of times and I'm going to continue to say it. This to me is the best like neutral lovers color scheme, hands down. Just because it has the best shimmering shades. You have something that's a little bit on the neutral side, something a little bit warm, something a little bit cool. You've got a little bit of purples over here, a burgundy. It still smells like chocolate. Not as like strong or as good as when I first got it, but it definitely still, you know, does what it needs to do or whatever. Next up are my Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes. I've got two. I've got the Soft Glam and the Subculture. First one I'm going to talk about is the Subculture because nobody likes this palette except for like a small handful of people. As you can see, I like Dawn. I've hit pan on that shade. This to me is probably one of the most unique color schemes, and I was so gravitated towards it because of these yellowy shades. You've got one that looks a little bit more like mac and cheese and another one that's got that mustard color to it. There are shades in here that I don't have anywhere else in my collection. I will say that the shimmer shades in here are not the best, but I am a matte shade lover, so I love the matte shades. I don't always go in with those, you know, shimmering shades or whatever, and I'm okay with that. So that's why I like it so much, because it has so many mattes and I like matte shades. And then of course I've got Soft Glam. I love, love, love this palette. This is my favorite ABH palette. I have not wanted anything else because to me, this is everything. I love that every single one of these shades is wearable. That's just what I like to go for. Every time I purchase a palette, I think, how many shades am I actually going to wear? And when I, you know, questioned myself on this one, I knew that I would wear every shade, even the pink ones. And I don't even like pink, but I even like the pink ones in this palette. It's also one of those things that you've got a really, really nice creamy sort of brow bone shade, and then you've got a really, really nice intense black. So love this palette. I want to say that my favorite shade in this palette is definitely Mulberry because I have nothing like that in any of my other palettes. So Soft Glam is my favorite ABH palette, hands down. Moving on to this little stack here. This is my Shop Hush stack, I guess. I only have two. I purchased this Beauty Creations Irresistible palette because it is the ABH Modern Renaissance. I'll be honest, I didn't want to spend the money on the ABH Modern Renaissance palette because I like the colors in that palette, but I'm not a big fan of pinks, and there's a lot of pinks in that palette. It's a very romantic palette, and I'm not a big fan of pinks like I mentioned, so I bought this just to sort of copy some of the looks that some people create. I do love the looks that a lot of people create using the Modern Renaissance palette, so I bought sort of a dupe for it. But as far as Beauty Creations, their formula is actually really, really good, and I'm surprised that not very many people talk about this brand. I'm going to swatch a couple of the shades. I'll swatch this really pretty sort of, you know, magenta color that's very popular in the Modern Renaissance palette, and I'm going to swatch this beautiful shade here. Oh my god, they're so creamy, it's crazy. And I'll give you a little show here as to how great this formula is. Like, they've got something going on really, really nicely over there, and that was a little bit on the chalky side, but it does blend out to that really, really nice magenta color. As far as their shimmering shades, I definitely think that the shimmering shades are way, way better than the matte shades. If you don't have the Modern Renaissance palette and I've always wanted to try it, I say give this a shot. I think this is only a $9 palette, so, you know, it's not too terrible. It does have a really nice mirror in it as well. That is a good quality mirror, and it's a cruelty-free brand as well. So, and then I've always wanted to try a Bad Habit palette, and when I saw that they were going to do a dupe for the Natasha Denona Tropic palette, I believe it's what it's called, I jumped on this because I really, really liked the color story in that palette. I loved that there were so many beautiful, like, neutral shades, and then these pops of color were just like unique. Like, you have a light blue, a dark blue, a green, a dark green, and then this beautiful lavender color. Like, I didn't have anything like this, and so I was really excited when they were gonna dupe it. I will give Bad Habit this. Their packaging is really nice and sturdy. It has a really nice, like, high-end feel compared to most duped palettes or whatever. However, the formula, I'm not like over the moon for it. I'm not gonna lie, I've used this palette maybe like 3 or 4 times because every time I've used this palette, all of the matte shades just muddy so bad. Like, they just become a muddy mess every single time, and I just am so disappointed because I wanted to like this so much, and they swatch great. Like, all the shades in here swatch beautifully. Like, I'll show you this blue, and then I'll show you, I don't know, this red. They feel creamy, they feel buttery, and they swatch beautifully. Like, you could easily see how beautiful they swatch. But when you use them on the eyes, or when you use like fluffy brushes to blend these shades out, like, oh, they're just not that good. Like my Wet n Wild palettes are so much better than this, and the Wet n Wild ones are like $5 or $6 I think. This costs 10, so not impressed with Bad Habit, to be honest. Some people really like their formula. For me, it's just a muddy mess. And I figured I'd save the best stack for last, all of my ColourPop palettes. Since so many people love ColourPop, I figured I'd save these for last. So the first one I've got here is their very first palette, and that is the Yes Please palette. I'm gonna be honest, I don't use this as often as I should, I guess. All of these shades are shades that I really, really like. I'm a warm tone lover, so I love warm tone palettes, as you could probably tell, since I do have a lot of warm tone palettes. However, this one, I don't know, I feel like there's just so much red and so much orange, and although I love those shades, I don't know, sometimes I do like to add a little bit of like a neutral shades here and there to my looks, but this is a really, really pretty palette. I don't know, I don't get that much use out of it. I don't know what else to say about it. It's just something that I've got. Up next is probably my least favorite ColourPop palette, and that's the Element of Surprise palette. If you watched my One Palette for a Week series using this guy, you know that everything in here is pink. Everything has kind of everything in here kind of has a pink undertone, and that's just not my favorite. I don't like pink anything, so kind of a bummer in my opinion, because the shades like from far away look so gorgeous and the color scheme is so unique. I only purchased this because this was the first ColourPop palette I purchased to try, and I loved that in this palette you got a little bit of everything in their formula. Like you had duochromes, you had satins, you had mattes, and then you had those like matte shades with like the sparkle in them. So that's why I bought it. I wanted to try a little bit of everything as far as their eyeshadow formula. Not my favorite. Probably don't know if I'll use it as much anymore, to be honest, but I mean, whatever, I have it. Next up is one that I've recently purchased. It's the Dream Street palette. Obviously the Kathleen Lights one. We all know this palette. I'm sure that most of you have this palette because a lot of people really, really love Kathleen. But this is really, really pretty. Like, I didn't want this because I'll be honest with you, when I saw this, I just kept staring at the blues and this crazy like vibrant red, and I knew that I wouldn't use those three colors at all. But if you take away those really bright colors, you have a beautiful, beautiful, like neutral everyday eyeshadow palette. And since I've purchased this, I've been using it just about every single day. Up next is the You Had Me at Hello, and this for the longest time was my favorite ColourPop eyeshadow palette, and in my opinion, one of the most underrated. Not very many people talk about it, which is kind of crazy because there are such beautiful, beautiful shades in here. Like this pink here, I'm not a big fan of pink, you guys, and you know that, but that pink, like, oh, it is so pretty because it has this like, I'll show you real quick. I don't know if you can see that. It has, yeah, you can. Has a gold like duochrome flip to it, and I love when pink shades do that. Like, I'm not a big fan of pink, but when it has that gold flip, it just looks so, so beautiful in my opinion. So love this palette, and it's also one of the few that comes with a mirror in it. So, and then the last one that I've got to show you guys is one that I most recently talked about. It is the Brown Sugar palette. This is the best 9 eyeshadow palette I own, in my opinion. We have a large mirror in here. We have beautiful transition shades. You have a really, really nice brow bone cream colored. Then you've got these really, really pretty deeper tones down here. This one here is almost like a gray like brown, so you can use that to deepen out the outer corner as well as line as like a liner or whatever. The shimmering shades, all 3 of these are stunning. All 3 of them work beautifully on the eyes for everyday looks. I love this palette. I've gotten so much use out of it. I can use this every single day and not get tired of it. So definitely underrated and one of my favorites. And that's all I've got for you guys today. So hopefully you enjoyed my updated collection. Let me know how many of these palettes you've got, because I have 20, a whopping 20 eyeshadow palettes now. Some of you may think that that's not too much, and some of you may think like, why does she need 20 eyeshadow palettes? Because I just do, okay? I just need them in my life. So, yeah. If you like this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and spread my love for makeup, and I will see you guys later this week. Bye-bye.